Now, one of the key industries that builds any economy, but which we can't take for granted, is steelmaking. And BlueScope CEO Mark Vassella knows it only too well, with just 6 years ago major questions hanging over the future of the Port Kembla Steelworks. He can also compare global trends and costs firsthand these days, with operations in Australia, the United States and China.
Yeah, it's been quite a remarkable year, Ross. There's no question about it. The best result we've had in our 20 years as a listed company. So we're very happy with the result, obviously. What we've seen over the last year has been a continuation of the very high demand levels that we saw when we went into the COVID pandemic. So really quite strong demand levels and high steel prices that have offset those raw material costs, particularly in the US, where we saw hot rolled coil go to almost $2,000 US a tonne, which is a price we've never seen in our industry, in the history of the industry, quite frankly.
So tell me whether this is sustainable or not. I mean, I recognise that there are areas where you can see it in timber, in copper and other things just coming off in price, oil prices as well. But what about in your industry? Is this sustainable, do you imagine?
No, look, the prices that we've seen for the last 12 months, Ross, aren't sustainable. We've seen them correct already, which is why our guidance for the first half of the 23 year is $800 to $900 million. Now, you and I have spoken over many years about the performance of BlueScope. I think it's fair to say $800 to $900 million for a half was still a fantastic result for BlueScope. If you think about historically, it's just we've come off such an extraordinary year. So the work that's been done in the business to transform the business, to get our cost position right, to build out our portfolio with a very large US-based business now, $800 to $900 million, our forecast for the first half of the new financial year is still a very good result for BlueScope from a historical perspective.
And there's the two areas of your business. One is quite clearly the construction materials, building materials is key, but then also there's infrastructure. So in regards to the next 12 to 18 months as you look forward, and the world is clearly slowing, that's what the, every forecast would say. How does that stack up in terms of demand for your products?
Well, our focus very much in Australia is around building and construction, residential and industrial and commercial. So very much a construction focus in Australia. We still see, certainly for the next 6 months, backlogs from a residential perspective and a strong pipeline of work in the industrial and commercial space. So we're expecting volumes to be about the same in Australia that they have been for the last 6 months. And in the US, where we have a growing presence, we do have an exposure to building and construction as well, also the automotive industry. What we're seeing in the US and what gives us confidence about continuing to invest in the US is the outlook, the infrastructure spend that's still being talked about by the Biden administration, whether it's infrastructure more broadly or infrastructure in the renewable energy space. All of those things are a positive for the steel industry.
I was going to ask you about that because today you've started on a master plan for the Port Kembla Steelworks, Australia's largest steelworks. And this is something coming into the centenary of that steelworks in around 6 years' time. So I just want to know where the future lies, because at least immediately, while everybody talks green steel, the fact of the matter is that metallurgical coal will, for the foreseeable future, I'd imagine, still be used and be still part of the process of steelmaking here and around the world.
Yeah, absolutely, Ross. I mean, 1.7 billion tonnes of steel produced globally, more than 70% of it produced in blast furnaces, which are reliant on metallurgical coal. That's not going to change anytime soon. There's lots of hope and there's lots of expectation and optimism about green steel technology. But in my experience, my view, I think we're at least 10 years away from that emerging as a viable alternative, either from a commercial or a technical perspective. The master planning exercise is not about replacing what we have there in terms of the steelmaking assets or our future as a steelmaker. You're right, we're emerging on 100 years of history, which is incredible for the Illawarra region. What it's about is we actually have surplus land. So as our business has grown over the years and we've refined our business, we have about 200 hectares of surplus land in and around our steelmaking facilities and the downstream facilities and operations that we have at Port Kembla. So we've kicked off a really exciting project over the next 18 months to think about how we can repurpose or reimagine that land and what opportunity that gives us, both from a a business perspective, but also really importantly from a social and community perspective.
Mark Vassella, always good to chat to you, Chief Executive of BlueScope Steel, and we'll do it again very shortly. Many thanks.